The Canes have been on the field here for almost 10 days now, folks. And there is always stuff to talk about concerning Miami football, looking to make a push toward an ACC championship in 2024. A lot of good things to be excited about. I'm also excited about this. Brad Tejeda's here from Canes Insight. Good to see
Yes, sir.
Brad. What's going on tonight, man?
What's going on, Mark? Thank you for having me, man. Sorry I'm a little late. I had to go run and get a headset. I lost my AirPods on my lunch break today, so now I feel like I'm at the McDonald's drive-through, get taking in an order, right? But we're here talking Canes football, and there's a lot to be excited about. We got spring break on right now, so a lot of these guys are putting in their own work on the off time right now. But so many loaded position groups, so many question marks, and a lot of big games ahead for the University of Miami. So I'm excited to talk some ball with you.
Well, if everyone could see me now and what I'm surrounded by, it's just a mess. I just moved into a new place, got stuff everywhere, and breaking out the audio board and all this stuff that I haven't used for like a year and a half. So, speaking of earpieces, I've gotten used to because I was going makeshift just off the laptop for about a year and a half, and my whole setup, my camera, everything has been out of circulation. So I've gotten away from using the earpiece, and now it's going to be kind of tough to get back to that. But it's hooked up into the audio board and ready to roll here. But I'm going to hit you with this, Brad, right out of the gate. I was checking out some of the numbers, and I'm on this site right now, Canes Insight. It's pretty good. It's there's a lot of good
Yes, sir.
stuff on here. So I'm
Yes,
checking it
sir.
out right now, and in terms of looking at Shannon Dawson's offense. His first year, they took tons of strides. When you look at how lowly rated they were in terms of yardage, explosiveness, and all the major metrics 2 years ago, and how much they improved, but still didn't cash in nearly as much as they should have. Considering if you're looking at a top 25 offense in a lot of the metrics, you should be producing more points, be more consistent, and a lot of that had to do with turnovers, some passes thrown to the other guy at the wrong times. And now with Cam Ward, if everything else stays the same and simply Cam Ward does his thing, you got to think, wow, what could happen here?
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the first season under Shannon Dawson to the second season, I mean, there was obviously you got to have a big jump. He went from the near hundreds to top 30, like you said, in a lot of different categories. But that big difference, like you said, was turnovers, red zone. You got to be able to go from 3 points to 7 points. Got to be able to convert points in general when it comes to the red zone, and you got to be able to not make mistakes on the offense side of the ball when it comes to turnovers, and then also on the defensive side when you do create those turnovers, you got to be able to capitalize on those turnovers. And of course, with Shannon Dawson, one of the biggest things he emphasized when he first got to Miami was going deep, right? We're going to go vertical. And that simply didn't happen last year. And a lot of that had to do with TVD, unfortunately. But now with a guy like Cam Ward, like you mentioned, this is a guy that could have went to the NFL, came back to college to play one more year at the University of Miami. He's got a lot riding on him this season, not only just for the University of Miami, but for his own perspective as far as going to the next level at the NFL. He came back to the University of Miami for one job and one job only, and that's to elevate his draft stock. The only way of doing that is to perform in college this last year. So lots riding on him, just like Miami. This is the third year under Mario Cristobal. You have to make that jump. I expect 9-10 wins has to be the minimum, in my opinion, between the teams you got on your schedule, between the guys you got bringing back, between having a Heisman candidate quarterback like Cam Ward. The sky's the limit for this team. You got to be able to execute this year on a lot of different areas, and it's going to start with that offense. But I'm excited to see what we get this year.
The first bit of news that I heard last week revolved around wide receiver play, seeing those guys take some strides. A lot of people were on hand for the first couple practices, were impressed with what they saw there. Now that we are, if you eliminate this week, because like you say, they've been off since what, Saturday, probably.
Friday was their last. Friday was their last practice, and they started spring break right after that.
So they got a weekend. And again, people understand there's only so much information that comes out of these spring practices. But we got the right guy here, Canes Insight. They do a great job of getting as much as possibly can be extracted from these sessions. So what are your first impressions of what they've been able to work on?
Specifically from the wide receivers, Mark, I would say first and foremost the true freshmen that have came in, guys like Nikar and JoJo Trader. Obviously, we haven't gotten Chance Robinson in from St. Thomas Aquinas. He'll be coming in the fall. That's going to be another big time threat for Miami. But just in general, just the two guys of JoJo Trader and Nikar. Usually in the past, when it comes to incoming freshmen at wide receiver for Miami, we either put a lot on their shoulders right from the beginning, expecting them to start because there isn't really a lot of guys there in the room that have done much, or it's a guy that has had a good freshman year and we're expecting him to do just that his sophomore year or better. And that's when the drop off starts, right? I think the last good freshman we had at wide receiver was Amon Richards, number 82, my guy. But I will say, guys like JoJo Trader and Nikar, because of the competition they played in high school, these are two guys in particular that once they get the frame of a college wide receiver, these are going to be two guys to watch out for. If I'm a guy in the secondary, JoJo Trader in particular, this is a young man that has made all type of flashes throughout high school. Played with some of the best competition in the nation. Him and Jeremiah Smith was your 1A, 1B as far as wide receivers we were going at. Obviously, we didn't land Jeremiah, but we got a guy in JoJo. They are training together right now as we speak on their spring break. So, competition and competition, you want to see who's the best, and that's how you do it, by going against the best in your class. But JoJo Trader in particular, what he's been able to do in spring, going up against guys like Daryl Porter, who's one of the top cornerbacks on our football team, probably the leader in the secondary right now, if I had to guess. JoJo Trader and him were going back and forth in practice. There was a couple times where JoJo got him right off the bat, and then Daryl Porter said, "All right, I'm a little seasoned guy. I'm going to show you what you're going to expect here in the football season. And you're going to get jammed up and we're going to get physical." And he did just that. JoJo got a little bit, shaken back by it for a second. And then the next 3, 4 following plays, he bombed guys and got touchdown after touchdown. So just being able to um, go through adversity, when you get knocked back, how do you respond to things like that? Someone like JoJo Trader, I mean, this is going to be a guy that he bleeds football. Almost every recruit that we have gone or talked to, me personally, in the last 2 or 3 cycles, that's the main difference, is the mentality of these guys. A lot of these young men, they've been playing football at the age of 5, 6 years old. Either their father was in the NFL, or they were destined for this. This is all they know. There is no more, football is on the back seat. We want guys who want to elevate the competition and want to get better. And it starts at the quarterback position. And a guy like Cam Ward is bringing just that. He's elevating every position group on the football team, not just on offense, but defense as well.
Folks, we take your comments and questions right here on Hurricanes Live, right here at the Voice of College Football. Appreciate you stopping by. Pull up a chair and take in some insight from Canes Insight and from Brad, of course. The Amazon link's in the description section, folks. When you shop on Amazon, please use the link we provide. It's easy. It is the same exact shopping experience. It's the one way that you can contribute financially without spending a penny. So use the Amazon link that we provide. Hit the like button as well, of course. Well, Brad, until we get some questions, let's run through the positions. Let's do that. We're at the quarterback spot. So Cam Ward, I didn't see him play a full game at Washington State. I can't remember ever seeing that. I've seen the highlights. I would drive by for a series or two, but how many people are watching Washington State play football? Come on. So obviously you were probably in the same boat, well aware of his talent and all that, but then you got serious about Cam Ward, obviously, a few months ago in regards to what is this guy all about? What does he bring to the table? He was arguably the number 1 rated guy at that position in the transfer portal. But beyond that, the guy definitely with the highest ceiling at quarterback in the transfer portal. So what have you seen from Cam Ward?
Yeah, anyone that follows me on Twitter, I've been on the Cam Ward train from the beginning. Ever since he announced he was hitting the portal, that was my guy, and I'm glad we got him. But I think from a mentality standpoint, like I mentioned before, this is a leader. This is one of the key things you need at quarterback, is a true leader. Someone that could bring the team together, someone who's not afraid to speak up, and someone who utilizes all of your football players, who's not afraid to make the check down, who's not afraid to go deep, who's not afraid to, after you make a turnover, whether it's an interception or a fumble, which Cam Ward has a little tendency of doing that, he's still not afraid to turn back around and make those big plays. These are the type of things we've been lacking at the quarterback position. Me personally, I think the last time we had all these intangibles as a quarterback in one was probably De'Aaron King. The only problem with De'Aaron King was he was a little bit undersized. Our offensive line at the time wasn't as best. So just overall, collectively, as a football team, the coaches we have in play, the offensive line we have in play, the skill position guys that we're bringing back, and Xavier Restrepo, Jacoby George, and others, these are the things that is going to help take a guy like Cam Ward to the next level along with this football team. You need a quarterback like Cam Ward to take you there. I know Mario Cristobal in the past has had some issues with game management, game calls, game planning, but when he does have an elite quarterback, example, Herbert, you saw where it took him, right? When you have an elite quarterback, even when you do make bad decisions as a coach, your quarterback will take you out of those decisions at times. He will be the fallback guy to create opportunities that weren't there. And that is one of the strong suits for someone like Cam Ward. But then going a step back, before we did land our guy Cam Ward, we landed someone else in the portal before Cam Ward, and that was Reese Poffenberger. This is another guy who is coming from a lower division program who, again, has a lot to prove. The one thing I like about both of these transfer quarterbacks that we brought in is they are still coming here with a purpose. They are coming here with a lot to prove and a lot to show on the table. Someone like Reese Poffenberger, even when he got signed at Miami, and him both knew that we were still going after another quarterback, whether it was Will Howard, whether it was Cam Ward, or someone else. So the fact that Reese has the mentality and has the competition to be able to want to compete with someone like Cam Ward, who's not going to back down, those are the little things that you want to see from a football team that was lacking the leadership in the quarterback room a year prior. So, as we know as college fans, when one guy goes down, especially at quarterback, you need someone to fill in that you're comfortable and responsible to do something like that. And I think Reese, along with Emery, along with Jakari, these are going to be three guys that are going to be battling all throughout spring and fall to see who's that quarterback two guy. But I think at the end of the day, you have to create competition and see who ends up winning that battle. But the fact that you have an elite guy like Cam Ward to be able to hold your shoulders on and still have other guys battling behind that, that's what you want to be able to create in that quarterback room. We've done it at the wide receiver, the tight end room, the running back room. You need to do it at the main position in quarterback. We all know in order to get to the next level, you got to have an elite quarterback that can help you out and bail you out in decisions. And we just haven't had that in the past. And this is going to be the first time in a very long time. It seems like we have a lot coming and gelling together at once. The offensive line is hitting all cylinders. You're bringing back your top two receivers, and you got an elite quarterback at Cam Ward. I think the biggest thing in all this is the continuity. This is your first time in a long time that your offensive coordinator and your defensive coordinator are both back. I can't tell you how difficult it is for college athletes to have to relearn the offense or defense year after year after year. You got to be able to get your feet in, put your brain in the playbook, and be able to get comfortable with these things. And it's impossible to do that when you're having to relearn things year after year. So I think there's going to be a lot of players like a Chase Smith, like a Elijah Arroyo, like a Isaiah Horton. These are guys, Wesley Basaint, Nigel Kelly, Jaden Harris. These are all names I could think of off the top of my head that should benefit from being in the system another year and still have a lot to prove. Because if they don't prove it, we have brought in other guys to take that spot. So it's going to be very interesting with a lot of the new young guys we have brought in, a lot of the new younger guys that haven't came in for the fall, along with the transfer portal, which we're going to hit very hard after spring. So this roster that we're seeing right now as Hurricane fans, it's definitely not finished yet. You're going to see some guys leave. You'll see some guys join. But at the end of the day, you're seeing the talent start to stack of Mario Cristobal, the way he evaluates, the way he recruits, the way he develops. You're starting to see night and day from a physical standpoint and from a development standpoint and from just on the field that we are getting there. And this is going to have to be the year to really show we can do it.
Jakari Brown is a pretty serious physical specimen. He's also rough around the edges, to say the least. However, the polish is starting to take hold from what we understand. He's becoming better understanding of the offense and what he needs to do and how to rein it in. Then you got Emory Williams, and talk about not pretty, obviously, the end of the game against Florida State. Field for the young man and him trying to make it back. But in regards to that game, the game wasn't real pretty. It was impressive what he was able to do, considering the completion percentage isn't great. This is the first time he's thrown into the fire, rivalry game on the road, the whole deal that he had to face. And shoot, once he threw that pass down the sideline and split two defenders, Miami had a shot there for a couple minutes. But your thoughts about the development of those two?
Yeah, with Emery in particular, I thought the way he battled through adversity that game and just stuck in there, and you really saw at the end of that game when he got carted off how much respect he got from his teammates there. Really laying it all on the line as a true freshman. That's what you like to see. You want guys that have heart, guys that aren't going to take a snap off, guys that when they are hurt, they don't want to go out. And I love to see that with Emery. Another great thing was he injured his non-throwing shoulder, so coming in the spring right now he is throwing, just fine. He's pretty much close to 100%. So from a physical aspect, he's right where he needs to be. I think with a guy like Emery, he just needs to keep developing and doing what he's doing. I think for someone like him, he just doesn't need to get out of his comfort zone. Don't do too much. Don't be someone that you're not. I think Emery has gotten to where he is today because of who he is. And I want to make sure that he remembers who he is. I don't want him to be able to change up his game because you got guys like Cam Ward, Jakari, and Reese, who all three have the intangibles to move with their feet and also create a lot of different plays when the pocket breaks down. Unfortunately, with guys like Judd and Emery, those aren't those type of guys. But you still got to be able to use your skill set to your advantage. I think someone like Emery, he is someone that has no problem taking the checkdowns, who has no problem taking what the defense gives him. And at a lot of times, you need that. You saw with the Florida State game, he did just that, and he kept us in the game. Someone like Reese Poffenbarger, he may not do something like that. He may try to win you the game or make the big play every single time. He's not going to be that conservative guy who's going to do the check down, who's going to take the defense, take the slants, take the underneath routes. And that's going to be his issue. He's going to have to take some time, understand that you don't have to make a big play every single play. Don't put your offense in a bad spot, which is why you bring in Cam Ward to kind of show these guys, hey, I can go deep one play, I could go underneath another play. You got to be able to utilize all your guys. And I think between him and Jakari Brown, like you mentioned, Jakari Brown brings an element to our quarterback room that nobody else has, right, with his feet. A lot of that may hurt him right now because obviously in spring he's not able to use his feet, so he's one dimensional right now, just like the other quarterbacks in practice. But once spring camp is finished and we go to that spring game on the 13th, I think when live action starts, that's when you're going to really see Jakari Brown shine and bring what he can to the table. I think with Jakari, he just has to keep doing what he was doing as far as blocking out the noise from the fans, from the media, and just stay true to himself. He's a guy that, he's very calm and collective. He's friendly with just about anybody. I mean, he has no enemies, in my opinion. I thought the interview that he had, was a good thing and a bad thing on certain levels. But he's a young man that he doesn't sugarcoat things, and he's very honest and upfront, and that's what you want in a young man. And when I talk to recruits all the time, that's what they love with Mario and all these other coaches on staff. They're very upfront and honest. I don't want to bring up recruiting right now because we're talking about the team, but one of the top running backs in the nation who just announced here shortly that he'll be making his commitment soon, 5-star running back Alvin Henderson out of the state of Alabama. When I spoke to him a couple weeks ago, he said that was the one thing that stood out with him and University of Miami and every other school. At the time, he was being recruited by our former running back coach that ended up going to UCF by the name of Coach Harris. Coach Harris went to his school and spoke to him and his mother and literally told them in his face, whether I am at the University of Miami or not, the U is where you belong. The following day, Mark, he woke up with a text message saying that Coach Harris was leaving the University of Miami and going to UCF. Him and his mom sat down, spoke for a couple hours, and was like, whoa, we got a little taken back by this. Should we still go on with the University of Miami visit? Well, because of how honest and upfront Coach Harris was, they believed that Miami could be a great spot and a great opportunity for him. He ended up taking that visit. He's scheduling an OV, and I expect Miami to be, right there in the mix, possibly getting that commitment from Alvin Henderson. So just an example of why honesty really helps, not only on the football field with your current players on the team, but also in recruiting.
Canes Insight, folks. That should be a regular stop for you with Brad and the rest of the crew there at Canes Insight covering Miami and its spring practice. The guys get back on the field next week. So we lead straight into the wide receivers. Obviously, good fortune that Xavier Restrepo decided, hey, let's bring it back, do it one more time here. What he's done with his body size with his limitations is pretty remarkable as one of the best wide receivers in college football. Colby Young moves on to Georgia. Just your thoughts about this group as they head into the rest of spring practice.
Yeah, I mean, can't can't say enough about Xavier Restrepo, right? This is one of the fan favorites, and it's for a reason. Everything he does on and off the football field is exactly what you look for in a student college athlete. Everything Mario Cristobal embodies of what he wants on and off the field is Xavier Restrepo, and we're starting to add a lot more of Xavier Restrepos, right? Guys like Ray Armstrong, guys like JoJo Trader. These are the type of guys that are going to work 24/7 and get better. And Xavier Restrepo, he's a top 5 receiver in college football for a reason right now. What he's able to do, not just without the football, but with the football. Even after he catches, he's one of the best at yards after catch. And when you pair him with a guy like Jacoby George, who I expect to have an even better year this year, it's really going to elevate everyone's game. I think the slot position behind Xavier Restrepo is probably our most talented group. I mentioned Ray Armstrong. Oh, I'm sorry, Ray Armstrong. I mentioned Ray Joseph, and I mentioned him as well, X. But then you also got Robbie Washington in the mix at that slot position. So these are 3 guys in particular that can really go the distance and can really create a big play just off the bat. And then you look at the outside, you got JoJo Trader, you got Isaiah Horton, you got Jacoby George in the mix. I would like to see 1 or 2 more wide receivers possibly after springtime. If I had to guess, I would say once transfer portal hits, they're going to go pretty hard at that wide receiver position. Just because when you look from a depth chart uh, perspective, we only have 9 current wide receivers at spring right now. Your 10th wide receiver will be coming in, Chance Robinson, after the spring. And there's no telling what's going to happen to guys like, Michael Redding, and even Shamar Kirk, who was a transfer Chuco that we got last season. So you still need to add at least 1 or 2 more bodies and elevate your game on the offense. Because when you got a guy like Cam Ward, who's at the top of the list in every quarterback room that you're looking at, you need to maximize that potential as best as you can. So bring as many quality guys to surround him with and make the competition as elite as possible because you're only going to get this guy for 1 year and you got to make it count. So bring as much talent to surround him as possible, and I like it. But the wide receiver room, you got at least 3 to 4 guys that I think are going to solidify themselves. I think JoJo Trader and Nikar are going to be 2 young freshmen to watch all throughout the football year, along with someone like Elijah Lofton, who doesn't necessarily play wide receiver, but he's going to be flexed out in multiple positions on this football field. So he's going to be another guy to watch.
And the extension of wide receiver, obviously the tight end position, and off the top of my head, maybe has the potential of being one of the most improved groups on either side of the ball. Elijah Arroyo caught 1 pass last year. Now he might be the guy to really be a breakout here in 2024. So your thoughts about Arroyo and the rest of the tight ends?
Elijah Arroyo, if I had to pick a player on this whole football roster that has a lot going for him to where we're expecting a lot. It's got to be Elijah Arroyo. He is going to be heavily in the mix. This is a guy that again Shannon Dawson wants to utilize these tight ends. Unfortunately, last year Elijah Arroyo was banged up. Your next tight end that came into the rotation was Cam McCormick, who, as we know, was one-dimensional, was very good run blocking, but couldn't really catch the football. So that hurts you anytime you brought in Cam McCormick from a defense perspective. They kind of already knew not to guard that guy, right? And when they didn't, he didn't catch the ball much, so that kind of hurt you. And your only other pass catcher at tight end last year that you really used was Riley Williams, and he was so young that you kind of had to put him in little opportunities so he could understand what the play that was being called. And even when the play did call, a lot of times he didn't run the right route. And, that just goes with experience. So bringing all these guys back is really going to help. But it's got to start with Elijah Arroyo. I mean, Elijah Arroyo is going to be flexed out as a wide receiver plenty of times throughout this whole football season, and he's got to stay healthy. As long as he is healthy, I expect him to be one of the go-to guys for this football team and for Cam Ward. Cam Ward likes to use the tight ends, and he likes to use slot guys. And Elijah Arroyo is someone that can go all lined up around the field, and especially in the red zone, which is going to be one of those key areas that we need to improve. I think Elijah Arroyo is one of those guys that will be a mismatch nightmare for defenses. And then, of course, I brought up Elijah Lofton earlier. He is going to be a guy that's going to be used in the backfield at tight end, double sets. This is a young man that when you see him listed, he's listed. He looks like he's a fullback, but he's a tight end and he's a football player. He's not just a tight end. I know a lot of people around the program are expecting Elijah Lofton. From when his career is done, people are going to know who his name is all around the country. Coming from Las Vegas, Bishop Gorman, wearing that number 9, similar to Brevin Jordan, who we know had a good career at the University of Miami before going to Houston Texans and doing his thing there. Elijah Lofton will be another name to watch out for in that tight end run.
Then I find it interesting that even though the team hasn't taken off these first 2 years under Mario Cristobal at 5-7 and 7-6, his obvious expertise, and not that he's the offensive line coach, of course, but just the attention to that position, given his ability to recruit, is arguably the best recruiter in college football. You put all those things into play and you take a unit that, and correct me if I'm wrong, is arguably the worst unit over the last 5 to 10 years in this program. And now it might be the best unit on the team like that. And it was, there were times last year I'm watching this team, and the North Carolina game comes to mind. And even though they lost the game, they moved the ball up and down the field, where I'm watching this offensive line thinking, man, this is just such a change from just a season ago. Remarkable improvement there.
Yeah, it's crazy what just 2 years do under a guy like Mario Cristobal and what he's able to bring to the table from a talent evaluation standpoint. I mean, obviously, not looking too far ahead, but August 31st, we play the University of Florida. And the last time we played that program in Orlando, we had a starting left tackle for the first time ever playing college football by the name of Zion Nelson, who was probably weighing 290 pounds soaking wet, had to gain 40 to 50 pounds just to look like somewhat of an offensive lineman by the time he got to campus. And we were heavily relying on this guy, and he did the complete opposite of what we thought he would. He gave up probably 9 or 10 sacks by himself, and that just goes to show you how important that offensive line and getting the physicality and the type of measurements that you need in order to compete on a weekly basis, not only in the ACC, but if you want to compete against the SECs and the Big Tens of the world. And with the offensive line we got now, Zion Nelson is nowhere to be found, and he's not someone that we're really depending on. We're starting to create depth. We have 7 to 8 guys that you O-line. You got 2 guys currently on the offensive line that will be starting come August 31st that aren't even in spring camp right now. And yet it seems like our O-line is still making progress, which is exactly what you want to see. We know with Alex Mirabal and Coach Cristobal, they love to cross-train, and they use this springtime to do just that. They're going to cross-train as many offensive linemen as they can for spring. These are the tryouts for our offensive linemen. Once fall camp comes, that's where they're going to start cementing these positions and kind of figuring out where the pieces need to fit with the puzzle. Because right now, a lot of these guys, they could play the left side, they could play the right side, but they're starting to figure out that at least 2 to 3 of these guys on the O-line have cemented a spot. One of them is Jalen Rivers on that left tackle. One of them is your center and Zach Carpenter. And then you obviously got Inez Cooper and Francis Mayagoa on that right side, but Francis is out for the spring right now. So they're using the different guys to throw in there. But I like where we're going with the offensive line. And I think by the time you see a starting 5 come August, you're going to see probably one of the most talented offensive line groups we've had since 2001.
We do appreciate everyone being here at the Voice of College Football, Falconer TRX. Appreciate you. Thank you for showing up with the super sticker. We got Brad Tejeda here from Canes Insight. We're breaking down the Canes on both sides of the ball. Mark Fletcher looked like a man, especially the back half of last season.
Yes.
Great games. Louisville comes to mind. There was another one in there for like a 140-yard game. Again, there was a reason he was ranked where he was, and Miami, of course, flipped him, and they're glad they did. And so now he springboards into 2024 with the rest of that running back group.
Yeah, with Mark Fletcher, unfortunately, he got banged up at the end of last year, so he had to get surgery. So currently, right now, he's one of the few guys in spring camp that has not played. He won't be back till hopefully fall, but we'll see how that goes. But right now, the running back room, you got Trevante Citizen, who's been banged up his whole college career, who we all expect to hopefully make some movement and some improvement here in his 3rd year at Miami. You also got Henry Parrish, who's coming off an injury as well. He's a little bit banged up in the springtime. But you do have some younger guys that they're using right now. You got Chris Hellcat Humphrey, and then you also have another running back by the name of Chris Johnson Jr. Both of these guys bring another dynamic to the running back room that I don't think any of the guys currently on the roster bring. And it's a speed element, right? Chris Hellcat and Chris Johnson, both of those guys can take it the distance off of one play. And when you talk to the current running back coach, Coach Merritt, these are things that are missing, that's been missing in the last few years in the running back room. We're starting to get the big body running backs that could run you over and are physical, but we're still missing the home run threat guys. We got to bring more speed to the table. And I think Chris Johnson and Chris Hellcat does just that. And you're starting to see in this 2025 class some of the running backs that we're recruiting. Someone like a Gerald Pringle Jr., who's very high on our list, is another guy that's a home run threat and could take it the distance. But the running back room in general is going to be one to watch. I would not be surprised if we look into the portal for another running back, depending on how much experience they bring to the table. We did try to get a running back from Florida State that signed as a walk-on, and he ended up leaving and going elsewhere. So I would say, maybe another running back could be a possibility in the transfer portal. But a lot of that, honestly, is riding on Javonte Citizen. I think Javonte Citizen, if anyone who follows recruiting, if you remember someone by the name of Travis Etienne, running back out of Florida that transferred to Georgia. As great as he was at Florida, ladies and gentlemen, he was not the number one running back in the state of Louisiana coming out of high school. That was Javonte Citizen, who is the current running back at the University of Miami. So that just goes to show you what type of the table when you see someone like Etienne do what he does in the SEC week in and week out. So just really getting healthy is what's going to be the key for Javonte Citizen. You don't want to put too much workload on a guy like him. You're going to want to ease him into things. And I think that Florida game first week will be a very big test for him because I think it's going to be a running back by committee that game. Because if you really look at our schedule, how it lines up, our first three games after Florida, I think you got Ball State and one other inexperienced team. Those three games, if you're able to bring in another portal guy in the running back room, or if someone like Citizen and Ajayi Allen can really step up and be those guys very early on, you may not even have to play someone like Mark Fletcher those first three games. If you could get by the Florida game without playing him and get a W under your belt, I would say, hey, rest Mark Fletcher as much as possible if you can, because that's going to be a guy that you're going to want at the end of your football season because he's going to really take things to a whole nother level, especially in the red zone, because he brings a whole nother element that we don't have in the running back room. So you're going to want that guy as healthy as possible all throughout the football year, because as we know, the playoffs, it has expanded, and I'm looking forward to it because I think Miami has a legit shot to hopefully get there.
Yeah, I've heard of several coaches during the offseason mention what the college football playoff expanded field is going to do, especially at the running back position. Defensive line's another position where you're used to rotating guys. Guys need a blow. You need to be able to have layers of players, and especially now with the extended season, if you intend on competing for a national championship, you got to be deep at every position, but especially those two positions because of the wear and tear on those guys. Falconer TRX, appreciate you. Before we head to the defense with Brad, sure, we'll give a prediction. The opener, it's in Gainesville for many of you, of course, against the Florida Gators, and it was 5 years ago. Yes, we will say Lamesville here on the Kane Show. Before Brad goes, I'm going to say, and don't hold me to this, of course, I'll have my prediction that week. I'll say Miami wins this game. It is on the road, tough environment, and this is before this team and this crowd's going to get beaten down by playing LSU and Alabama and Georgia and everybody else week after week after week. So they're going to be excited. I'm going to say 27-20 Canes.
27-20 Canes. All right. For me, the Florida Miami game is a rivalry that if you've never been a part of, you definitely have to. And if you've never been in Ben Hill Griffin Stadium, I suggest you make the trip August 31st, because if you've gone to the Texas A&M game a couple years back at Texas A&M, which I was there, if you went to the Virginia Tech games in 2017 when those were memorable, how loud they were, This is going to be that type of environment. It's going to be hostile. It's not going to be a fan base that are going to greet you before and after the game, even if you win or lose. It's not going to be a stadium where you're going to be able to walk into and be able to talk to someone to your left and right and be able to hear them. It's going to be loud. The way the structure is built in that stadium, all the fans are literally on top of each other. It's built like a high school stadium. It's got bleachers everywhere, and it's loud. The great thing is we have a quarterback that is used to that environment, that has been in that environment. We have a quarterback in Cam Ward that has beaten Graham Mertz, the starting quarterback at Florida, and DJ Ukulele, the quarterback at Florida State. He has beaten both of those guys in his college career. So you have that going for you. But the only thing you don't have going for you is, history. And history shows that Florida currently has the longest FBS home opening winning streak in college football, which I believe is 34 or 35 games, right? And they are a team that starts out fast and then gets mollywopped all throughout the year. But this is the beginning of the year, so I expect a close game. But I got my Canes. I'm going to say 24-17, the University of Miami.
Good pick. 7-point spread. Sounds familiar. I think we're on the same page between Brad and myself. Before we hit the defensive side, somebody in the chat was leading us right into our next unit here, wanting a breakout D tackle.
Breakout D tackle. All right, I'm going to give you two breakout D tackles. One name that has been making a lot of buzz in spring, and this is a young man that was recruited out of high school as a basketball player, transitioned into a football player his last year as a senior in high school, and that is Jared Harrison Hunt. This is a guy that when he first came into the program under Manny Diaz really shined his first year. But then after his first year, he battled through injuries and then obviously bringing other guys in. It was a hard time getting back in the depth chart. Well, right now, it's a play by committee at the defensive line position. This is going to be our deepest group by far on our football team, and it's make it or break it for a lot of these guys. If you can't shine now in the spring, it's going to be hard to shine in the fall because we got guys that are coming back off of injury into fall camp that are going to be back. And then you also got some young guys that are freshmen, guys like Armando Blunt, guys like Justin Scott, guys like Artavius Jones, bringing in someone back like Joshua Horton, Ahmad Moten. These are all guys that have intangibles to be a great defensive tackle. It's just having the chance to do it. Well, guess what? Your chance is very slim now because we're just bringing in so many quality guys. So it's up to them to really make the opportunity right now. And Harrison Hunt is doing just that. And all the coaches have really spoken positive about him, not only on the football field, but how he carries himself off the football field. And he's a guy that could play outside, inside. He's a tweener as well. He could be lined up in different packages. So I think Harrison Hunt is going to be one guy to watch out for as far as the defensive line position. And then I'll throw out a younger guy that hasn't got on campus yet, and I mentioned him earlier, and that's Justin Scott, 5-star defensive lineman who we flipped from Ohio State, and he's a physical specimen. He's a guy that as soon as he gets on campus, he's going to stand out immediately. The same way that Miami fans and the staff have been raving about Markel Bell, the transfer tackle JUCO that we got, who's 6'9", 300-plus pounds, who just looks like a man-child compared to everybody else. That's exactly what someone like Justin Scott is going to bring to the table on the defensive line front because we've been really missing that three-tech guy. I think the last quality guy we had was Gerald Willis. So you want to bring in as many guys as you can with that. So Ahmad Moten, Artavius Jones, Blunt, and Scott, those are going to be four guys that are really, really going to be battling with one each other to really get some playing time this year. But I really do like Harrison Hunt as far as a standout defensive tackle.
Hurricanes Live typically on Wednesday night, folks. We've got a special edition here because we got Brad Tejeda here from Canes Insight. Make it a regular stop. This is the time of year to do it. Be an expert. Track everything at Canes Insight. Know your Miami football. The guys get back on the field next week. And so this is a good chance to get caught up on the first week of spring practice and everything else that's going on, recruiting and otherwise. Just a couple of minutes ago, Brad, you mentioned an excellent interview you had with the Alabama running back prospect.
Yes, Alvin Henderson.
Yeah, break us down for us. Just let people know what you guys have available in regards to interviews, but really anything.
Yeah, so I mean, honestly, right now, man, the CanesInsight.com, the forums are really like blowing up in general right now. D Money, Peter Rees, and myself, we've really taken things to another level. We're dropping things literally every single day now on the channel, whether it's live news from practice, whether it's recruit interviews, or just anything and everything regarding Miami Hurricanes, not just football but baseball. And of course, the hockey team just won a national championship, so congrats to them as well. But when you're talking about Alvin Henderson, this is a young man that when you turn on his tape, he's an absolute freak. He's from the state of Alabama, and as we know, anyone that follows recruiting, we had another guy at the running back position last year out of the state of Alabama that we got to the wire with, and he ended up going elsewhere. Um, this young man actually trained with him, so that's a good sign as well. But with Alvin Henderson in general, I mean, you're not going to find too many high school kids in the country that can score 61 touchdowns in just 14 games. He was a back-to-back 1A running back of the year in the state of Alabama. So as far as accolades, as far as what he brings to the table, he checks off every box. He ran for 3,500 rushing yards, averaging like 250 yards a game. He's coming into his senior year with still a lot to prove. I know Florida State was one of the teams to watch out for, but if I had to guess right now, I don't think Florida State's nowhere in the mix with that. I like where Miami stands. There's a couple other schools that are really looking heavily after him, but Alvin A. Train Henderson is one of the top running backs in the nation for a reason. There was a couple other good recruits that I've interviewed recently that have really stand out to me. Luca Gilbert, who's a 6'7", 233 tight end out of Westchester, Ohio. This is a young man that also plays basketball, has had recent offers from Texas A&M, Florida, and a few others. But this is a guy that hasn't stopped growing. He's 6'7" right now, but he could get to 6'8", someone that could possibly slide in and transition to an offensive lineman if you wanted to. So this is a guy that could be under Coach Woodle, could be under Coach Mirabal. But when you speak to this young man, what really stands out is his mentality, the way he carries himself on and off the football field, the way he describes the word dog, the way he works out on and off the football field, the way he attacks not only defensive linemen, but every day in the classroom, on the football field. These are the things that Mario Cristobal looks for in just student athletes. And Luca Gilbert, it honestly seems like he was born under Mario Cristobal. Anytime I talk to him, he's probably my favorite recruit in this class. So Luca Gilbert's one to watch. Cortez Mills has been getting a few crystal balls here lately in the last 48 hours. He's a wide receiver out of Homestead who I recently interviewed as well. Team Raw, 7-on-7. This is a kid that is one of the top receivers in the country, one of the top receivers in South Florida, who I expect to end up going to Miami. But we're on the rise here. There's going to be a few more other guys that will be getting some crystal ball predictions here shortly. And as we know with Mario Cristobal, when he puts on the loafers, you better watch out. We're going to start our first wave here soon before the month of June.
Falconer TRX. Falconer, you threw me with this one. I was not seeing this here because Falconer is usually full straight ahead. Canes, just going to nothing but success. But he says Miami's not back, but the pieces are in place. All right, linebacker, Brad. Francisco Mount Noah. The tackle for loss stat, I got the stats right in front of me. 18 last year. That's like an edge rusher stat. You don't see linebackers getting behind the line of scrimmage, throwing guys for 18 losses in a season. You just don't see it.
Francisco meant so much to this football team last year. It's not even funny. The way he carried our linebacker room, he was literally the only guy we could rely on in that running back room. The next guy you really had up was Corey Flagg, who was a little undersized, who you had to put in certain situations just because of his athleticism and speed running sideline to sideline, really hurt you at times. And you saw that with other guys in the past too. Guys like Michael Pickney, Zach McLeod, Jack Quarterman. These were all good linebackers for us as well. But they also had their weaknesses and deficits. But what you're seeing now with the linebacker room, it is night and day the way it has transitioned in the last two cycles. This is one position group very similar to offensive line and running back, where they're really starting to narrow in on what they're looking for. They have a blueprint, whether it's size, measurables, physique, what you're bringing to the table. And I like our linebacker group. All of these guys have to be, 6'2", 6'3", pushing 230 pounds, all very fast, can run sideline to sideline, all can play coverage, all can run and stop. I like a guy like Cameron Pruitt. If I had to say someone to watch very young on this football team that can really make a statement in this linebacker room, it's probably Cameron Bobby Pruitt, who's a true freshman, who's came into spring and has really elevated his game very quickly. He's a guy from a football IQ standpoint, can really pick up on things very quickly. He also already had the collegiate body coming in to where he didn't really have to put too much more weight on. So he's able to get thrown in there right away and work with the big dogs. And he's coming from the state of Alabama. So that's one of, the top states where you're looking for. Cameron Bobby Pruitt and Cole McConaughey are the two guys out of the state of Alabama who were probably the best at their position. And I have a lot of expectations for both of those guys. But Cameron Bobby Pruitt, Popo Aguirre, who's the backup Mike linebacker behind Francisco right now, who's out in the spring. So Popo's getting a lot of burn right now. Cameron is getting a lot of burn. You also got Bobby Washington, Marcellus Pulliam as well, and Wesley Basaint. If I had to circle one linebacker out of all the guys in our room, it's probably going to be Wesley. The same way I feel about Elijah Arroyo on the offense side of the ball, that we really need to see elevate their game to see what they got. I think Wesley's in the same realm, and he's doing just that. I think from a body standpoint, he's really taken the weight room to another level. His speed has gotten quicker, and he's a guy that played out of Miami Central, so he's able to play against competition week in and week out. I think it's really just about establishing himself and really getting comfortable, right? We talked about it earlier in the show about how important it is to keep your coordinators there because of these younger guys not having to relearn an offense or defensive scheme. And I think someone like Wesley is really going to benefit from that this year. So I'm excited to see what Wesley brings to the table in that linebacker room because, as we know, Francisco is out this whole spring. So it gives someone like Wesley to really show what he can do. And I think at the end of the day, Francisco and Wesley will be your 1-2 punch in the linebacker room. But I think other guys like Popo, Cameron, Bobby, and Marcellus has something to prove as well.
The Saint 44 tackles, 6.5 tackles for loss, and 2 sacks in 2023. And Brad's looking for more out of him. We kind of skipped over the edge. Let's kind of morph them into the linebacker crew. Of course, Hurricane Bane was remarkable last year, 12.5 tackles for loss, 7.5 sacks. What are they going to do to complement him, try to take pressure off him, free somebody up on the other side that can really bring it from the other side?
Well, I gotta say, Mark, first and foremost, it's more like you can blindfold and just pick a name out of the hat on this defensive end position and feel very comfortable with. I mean, Jason Taylor really has. I mean, he has everything to work with. Having a Hall of Fame coach like himself, what he's been able to do from a recruiting aspect of really bringing in a lot of talent and stacking that room very quickly. I mean, guy like Ruben Bain, the question you ask is how do you help him? I think those were questions we were asking ourselves all last season, and yet we didn't have an answer for it, but Ruben Bain did. I mean, you had guys like Nigel Kelly and Akeem Mesidor who were both out most of the year last year, and those were your two dominant pass rushers before Ruben Bain came in the picture, and Ruben Bain was still dominant even with those guys not being there. Well, now you fast forward to now, we're talking spring ball. Najee Kelly, Akeem Mesidor. Those are two guys that are not here in the spring right now, but once fall camp comes, again, competition is going to raise to another level. You bring in a transfer guy in Elijah Austin out of Marshall, who's going to be a big time guy for us. I think everyone in the building expects a huge performance from Elijah Austin, very similar to how Greg Russo and Jalen Phillips was for this football team. I think someone like Elijah Austin could do just that. It also gives you the opportunity of not having to move Ruben Bain around and really to have him really start to cement himself in at one position to where he can really capitalize and start to get comfortable there. And that's only going to elevate Ruben Bain's game to another level. But when you talk about the pass rushers, we said Nigel Kelly, we said Mesidor and Bain, but then it also brings in other guys. What are guys like Jaden Wayne going to do for this football team? Jaden Wayne, coming out of IMG, was one of the top defensive linemen in the country a couple cycles ago. Mario Cristobal was able to flip him from the West Coast and bring him over just because of the recruiting aspect. This is a young man that he was recruiting since since eighth grade. Him and Riley Williams both. So that goes to show you what Mario Cristobal does on the recruiting front. But Jaden Wayne is going to have to prove a lot this upcoming year to be able to get in the mix with things, because you got some young guys in. I mentioned Cole McConaughey, who's a little banged up right now, but he is going to cause some havoc once fall ball comes. But you also got Booker Pickett Jr., Elias Rudolph. You got Marquise Lightfoot, who's in spring right now, who's really going to make some waves, in my opinion. He's going to be a guy to watch. We mentioned Elijah Austin. I think that's really it for the pass rusher group. That, I mean, other than that, most of your guys are interior guys. You got Thomas Gore, Justin Scott, Armando Blunt, Ahmad Moten, Dalen Russell, Thomas Gore, Anthony Campbell, C.J. Clark, Marley Cook. Those are all interior guys. But I like what we're going with the pass rushers. It's going to be very interesting to see how we utilize these guys come August 31st against Florida, because Florida is a team that they're very inexperienced on the offensive line. The only experienced guys that they are bringing back are two or three, I believe, and none of them are playing the same position they played last year. So from a continuity perspective, from meshing and gelling together, this is going to be a brand new O line for Florida. So we're going to need to capitalize similar to how they were able to do against us in Orlando a few years ago.
And you pretty much know where you're going to be able to find Graham Mertz. He's going to be standing right in the pocket, so you pretty much know if you can beat your man, where Graham Mertz is going to be. He's not going to get away from you, so that's an advantage too. Uh, Correct me if I'm wrong, Brad. You hit on the transfer portal in terms of how aggressive that this team will be post spring. Do you think cornerback is a primary spot where they will probably go after a guy or two?
Yeah, I think right now the secondary is looking like probably the biggest improvement that needs to be made. A lot of that, honestly, though, just has to do with bodies. We don't have that many bodies in the cornerback room right now. I think we only have 4 or 5 guys that were able to rotate in spring ball. We got 2 or 3 guys banged up that will be coming back after fall, and then we got 2 or 3 guys coming in as a true freshman. I'm really anticipating what Ryan Mack could do. Maybe not his first year in the program, but maybe his second or third year. This is a guy that really has all the intangibles from a football IQ, from a talent standpoint. He's just a little bit slim. Once he gets into a football weight program at the college level and puts on some weight, I think he could turn into one of the best cornerbacks we have in the room. But I will say a guy like Dylan Day out of the state of Louisiana, who was a Lance Guidry type of guy, he is someone that's making a lot of headway here in spring. He's not necessarily a true cornerback. He's going to play more of that nickel safety position. But as we know with a Lance Guidry defense, that's the most important role on that defensive front. He's going to be a guy that's going to be a chess piece and moved all around the field. We're using Dylan Day and Mish Powell in that spot right now. You're used to Corey Couch and others being there in years prior. I think Jaden Harris was there last year. No, not Jaden Harris, Jaden Davis. Jaden Davis was the guy in that spot last year. But I'm expecting a very big improvement. But when it comes to the recruitment, I think you're going to go after a guy in the secondary. You need a guy that could just make plays. You need someone who is established, in my opinion, someone that when he gets on the football field, the offense and the quarterback has to look out for. I don't want to bring in another rotational piece on that secondary, in my opinion. If we're going to go after a guy, make sure it's a guy that you could capitalize on and potentially be a day one starter. Because I think when we brought in Mish Powell, the original take for him was to be that starting safety alongside of maybe Zaquan Patterson or Jaden Harris. But I think they're starting to realize that Mish Powell is a chess piece type of guy, and they're using him a lot in that nickel spot, like I just mentioned with Dylan Day. I mean, I think he's going to be a key that first game going into Florida at the slot position. So I want to bring in preferably a safety if possible. But wide receiver is going to be another group that they're going to look at in the portal as well, heavy.
Good stuff out of Brad tonight. Appreciate Brad showing us up for us this week. Kane's Insight is your spot, folks. I will double check the chat for anything beyond George going crazy about the Gators and spewing a bunch of nonsense. We love you, George. You know I'm just kidding, even though I'm not. But we love you, George. But George is here defending the Gators, and that's going to be that you got your work cut out for you this year, George. I don't know what they're going to do about that situation. And I know, Brad, you've touched upon Florida and you're already starting to scout them a little bit. You gave us a nice little synopsis on the offensive line there, but they had a great recruiting class leading into December last year, top 3, top 4. It still was a good one at about number 11. Looks like they're shaping up for a similar run. I just don't know what they're going to do if they go. They could be the best 5-7 team in the history of college football if they win 5 games. I just don't know if they will. 4 or 5 wins, maybe. And let's say Billy Napier's primed for a top 10 class, and we're 2 weeks away from National Signing Day after the season's over. I don't know if they're going to put that much stock in that recruiting class to say 3 losing seasons in a row. We're going to give him a 4th year just because he's bringing in some players, or if they're just going to say enough's enough.
Well, I will say this, Mark. Florida, unfortunately, they're kind of handcuffed and they're in a pickle, right? For a lot of people that aren't aware, it kind of starts with the athletic director, right? I think as Miami fans, we kind of know how this feels because when we had Blake James and Manny Diaz here, we felt handcuffed a lot too. In order to get changes made in the football realm, we think it would have to go through our head coach, but unfortunately, it went through the athletic director and Blake James. Well, it's kind of the same thing that's happening at Florida. Their athletic director, Scott Strickland, is really handcuffing the department of the football team because Billy Napier is his right hand guy. And if you really look at the monies, the numbers when it comes from a financial standpoint, if you were to fire Billy Napier before the season started, it would cost you $8 million just to fire him. So then you look into this football season, and you brought up a great point about recruitment, how they start out fast, and then once the season starts, it starts to tremble, and then they fall apart. Well, what's going to happen week 4, week 5, when Florida is maybe 2-2, 2-3? Do you pull the plug then, or do you wait till the season's over? Because if you wait till the season's over, now you're starting all over again, not only for your football team, but now what's going to happen with recruitment? What's going to happen with current guys on your football team? What's going to happen with all the relationships you built all throughout this football season? That's going to be more of a tricky question for Florida. And if I'm a Florida fan, I'm hoping Billy does good because if not, you're going to have to hit the reset button another 2 to 3 years, unfortunately. So you're going to want Billy to do good just because from a money aspect, there's just a lot of money invested in a Billy Napier. And like I said before, the puppet and all this is the athletic director. So in my personal opinion, especially Florida fans that are watching this, they could probably agree with me. It all starts with Strickland. Until Strickland's gone, I don't see Florida football progressing anytime soon. He's the athletic director that hasn't really made the best decisions, not only in football, but in a lot of other realms of sports when it comes to hires at the University of Florida. So it's going to be interesting to see what they do as a whole, not just football.
If I'm not mistaken, Strickland was at Mississippi State
He
before
was. He was the
Florida.
one that brought
Yeah.
Dan Mullen.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay. And the other aspect in this, if Billy Napier is let go, is I'm sure there's going to be an internal struggle over do we go after, do we have to bring in somebody that's going to make a huge splash that people are just going to jaw drop over the big hire, or are we smart enough and do we have the hiring practice in place that we can spot a guy that people aren't going to ooh and ah over, but he's a young guy, up and coming, smart, go getter, that is going to be somebody that can build something. But or are they going to feel the pressure to have to wow people with a hire?
Yeah, unfortunately with Florida, I mean, Florida is one of those programs where, I mean, any coach in the country, I mean, you shouldn't turn down a Florida job. I mean, that's one of the top coaching jobs you could get in the country. A lot of it has to do with the foundation of money that's behind it. You don't have to worry about from a money standpoint that once you are the coach, pretty much you have everything, all the intangibles that you need. They will give you just that. They have a lot of things in place that a lot of other universities still don't have yet. But again, you got to a lot of this stuff goes into politics too. As we know at and other universities, there's a lot of politics that go in behind the scenes on who is the guy to make the hire. But me personally, I think some of the more interesting guys that, in my personal opinion, that would scare me as an opposing fan, um, those guys that would be head coaches for Florida, I don't think would ever happen just because of from a politics standpoint. If I had to think of names off the top of my head, I think guys like Deion Sanders and Lane Kiffin are two at the top of my head that if they were at the University of Florida, I mean, that would be very scary from not only a recruitment aspect, but just what they bring to the table as far as being exciting. I think a lot that has to do with Florida right now is not just from a recruiting aspect, but just from a media aspect. Nobody believes in Florida. Nobody believes in Billy Napier. When you look at what all the coaching changes and all the coaching hires he has done in the last 2 years and just in the last 6 months, I don't think there's a program in college football that's had so many coaching moves more than Florida. Anytime they hire a guy, whether it's at a coordinator position, at a, assistant position, or just someone they bring in off field, within a month, within 3 months, they're already leaving for other jobs. A lot of times it's better opportunities, so that's a good thing. But then in other times, they're just moving for lateral positions. From the outside looking in, that's not a good look. That tells me that no one believes in what Billy's trying to do. So it's really important for Billy and this football program to really adapt some wins this year. But I really don't see it.
And Brad, when you talk about politics playing a role, are you talking about a hire like Lane Kiffin or Deion Sanders that they're not conservative enough? And I'm not talking about politically. I'm talking about
Correct.
they're
The
too
boosters.
out there. They push the envelope. They're a little bit too out there that they don't want somebody like that. A lot of the movers and shakers at Florida.
Correct. Yeah,
Okay.
the boosters, the guys that are putting the money in for the program. I think there's some speculation with those type of guys. They want someone that's a little bit more clean cut. And again, these type of things, it's not just hurting their head coaching hires. It's also hurting the NIL department. We know NIL is very important right now in college football, and UF is one of those schools that haven't really been doing a very good job at that.
Yep. And just here in the last few weeks, of course, with the rulings in Tennessee and Virginia, the dogs have been called off heading toward Tennessee, Miami, Florida State, and some other locales because, hey, regardless of whether you like where college football is going, freedom of movement, freedom of choice, all those things are American rights for all of us. So we're in a good place when it comes to that. I understand it's chaos, the wild wild west. I don't particularly like it either because it's just so crazy. But I do not want to limit what these uh, student athletes have the opportunity to do. They should be able to have the same opportunities the rest of us have to make money and to choose where they pursue their careers.
No, absolutely.
Brad, thank you so much for being here. Everybody, canesinsight.com. And Brad, if there's anything else that you want to point out, certainly you've got the floor.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you for having me, man. As always, I got to start doing this more often, talking some Canes football with you. It's always a pleasure to talk on this platform. And yeah, man, I appreciate everything. And before I go, just make sure you check out canesinside.com. We got the top forum in the country, man. It's continuously updating by the minute, by the second. And just want to drop some recruit names for any of the Miami fans that are watching to keep a lookout for. You got Cortez Mills, Amari Wallace, Chris Ewald, Bryce Fitzgerald, and a few other guys. But just off the top, those are some names to watch out for in the next couple months as Miami Hurricane fans as we start to trend towards recruitment. Mario Cristobal is going to start putting these loafers on very soon and taking some names from guys. So it's a pleasure always talking Canes football with you, Mark.
Brad, thank you so much for being here. We appreciate it. You know you're welcome anytime.
Appreciate you, Mark. Thank you as always, and go Canes.
Want to remind everyone here at the Voice of College Football, our next show coming up here is the Clemson Tigers All In Show. It's coming up here in 20 minutes. We got Jordan Bowman. We've got our guy, Tiger Paw Craven. Again, that's on the Clemson Show. That's the All In Clemson Tigers Show. That's at 7 p.m. Eastern Time tonight. So get on over there. I'm not involved, so go have a good time. Miami fans, ACC, there's the connection. Go talk Clemson football with those guys. And they talk all of college football in the ACC as well. So join us there again in 20 minutes on the Clemson channel. And we will see you back here next week for Hurricanes Live.